Nothing but a good time. The new documentary on Paramount Plus, Nothing But a Good Time, attempts to encapsulate the entire Sunset Strip hair metal scene. What are my thoughts on it? Well, I was once one of those kids handing out flyers on the Sunset Strip. It was my dream in life after seeing Van Halen videos on MTV to come out to Los Angeles and live the rock star dream. Now, what did I think about this documentary, this rockumentary, if you will? Almost a Spinal Tap style romp. But the first takeaway that I had from watching this was that the band that had really inspired the entire scene was well underserved. And I'm talking about a little band from Pasadena named Van Halen. Now, Van Halen is mentioned a few times in the documentary. And, their influence on the entire scene is noted. But really, at the beginning of the whole thing, it's kind of like, oh, well, there was Van Halen, and then Quiet Riot came along, and I'm thinking, wait a minute, wait a DAMN minute. Okay, so let's note what was happening in the music business at the time. You know, record companies at the time were pushing a genre, just like they pushed grunge, and just like they eventually, before that would push hair metal and disco and, early rock and roll and whatever genres they've pushed over the decades, all right? And at the time in Los Angeles, punk and new wave were the latest and greatest things that the record industry was telling all the kids to buy. Whether it's Devo or, X, the band, the LA band X, or the Go-Go's, or any number of things like this. This is what the record companies were feeding you. Now, meanwhile, back out in Pasadena, a backyard party band that had stars in their eyes and a star in the front man position. Well, they were playing backyard parties and, VFW halls and bars all across Southern California. Yes, Van Halen, David Lee Roth, Michael Anthony, Alex Van Halen, and Edward Van Halen. These guys weren't following trends. They were inspired by the bands that they loved, whether it be Grand Funk Railroad or Led Zeppelin or The Who or Cream. One of Eddie Van Halen's early influences was Eric Clapton and his playing in Cream. It is said, or he said, that he had learned every note that Clapton had played. Now, this was a revelation that I didn't hear till later on, because I don't equate Eddie Van Halen and Eric Clapton in the same school. But I've heard him play the Crossroads solo note for note. And so Van Halen, who started out as a three-piece called Mammoth in Pasadena, playing backyard parties, and it quickly became noticed that Edward Van Halen was a star with star quality playing ability. But it took David Lee Roth getting into that band and dressing them up and getting Edward to style his hair and putting on show, putting show business into their show and becoming a front man for that band. But they still struggled. They played backyard parties. They played biker bars. They played wet t-shirt contests. They played anywhere that somebody could have them until Bill Gazzari gave them a chance on the Sunset Strip. Now, like I said, at the time, punk rock was ruling the roost of the Sunset Strip. But they broke in at Gazzari's, and they started playing the Starwood, and they started playing the Whiskey, and people began to take notice. But the punk rockers that were ruling the scene, they would look at these guys and go, oh, here come the hippies, and they would make fun of them. You know, Gene Simmons attempted to do something with Van Halen, but ultimately he and his manager, Bill Aucoin was the one that passed. He didn't hear it. And they were spat back out on the scene, sent back down to Pasadena. And, you know, they didn't initially make it. They had to work hard. And, you know, Van Halen, they would dress in overalls and set up their gear so that no one would see the unglamorous side of rock and roll. And then they'd go backstage and put on their stage outfits and hit that stage, and they would put on a show like nobody had ever seen, with the two-handed tapping and the hot-rodded Marshalls and the big hair of their lead singer and lead guitarist, Eddie Van Halen and David Lee Roth. They cast the blueprint for this entire thing, the entire scene. I didn't go out to LA to become W.A.S.P, to join a band like W.A.S.P. I didn't go out to LA to become Dokken. I didn't come out to LA to be Motley Crue. I came out there because I saw Van Halen. I saw what I perceived to be the lifestyle that they were living. And that is why I headed out west. So for this whole series, to skip over that and kind of just, oh, well, there was Van Halen. But then Quiet Riot. Oh, look, man. Quiet Riot had a young guitarist named Randy Rhoads before it got signed. And they were rivals with Van Halen on the Strip. But largely, people that saw both bands back in the day, Randy Rhoads, if you listen to the demos, the album they put out with Randy Rhoads, and see the bootlegs, you know, of Randy Rhoads playing in Quiet Riot at the time. Randy Rhoads was not on the same level at that time that Edward Van Halen was. But Randy was a great guitar player, and he learned fast. And he learned fast and added his own classical elements. And boom, when he hooked up with Ozzy Osbourne, he burst onto the scene. But essentially, the Paramount Plus episode, you know, the first episode, and this is a 3-episode documentary, it essentially kind of starts with Quiet Riot. And it progresses through the entire hair metal scene. It talks about W.A.S.P, and W.A.S.P with all its big theatrics and the girl on the rack and throwing meat into the crowd. And it talks about the plane crash of Randy Rhoads. And it talks about a lot of different things. Now, one of my favorite parts and the favorite character in this whole thing, now, Tom Zutaut is all over the thing because he was one of the guys that, look, A&R guys, they're just, you know, and I've been an A&R guy in a small startup label. And you're sitting at your desk and you're like, what's the next thing? Where's the next greatest band? And you start It's hard to find talent. You'll get tapes and tapes sent to your desk and you put them in and go, next, next. But it talks about Tom Zutaut, driving down Sunset and seeing a line out front of the whiskey and seeing Motley Crue on the marquee. And look, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to see, hey, if kids are lining up for something, hey, maybe this will sell records. It doesn't take a genius to figure that out. But, this is kind of the state of the whole industry. They're looking for something. They're looking for something with already a huge following. And Motley Crue was starting to make noise. Now, and what I was starting to say before this, one of my favorite characters in this thing is Alan Niven. Alan Niven is obviously from England, and he pulls no punches in this whole thing. Some of my favorite moments are him sitting there, and it looks like he's got a wine glass with orange soda in it. And his segments are some of the best in the whole event. Now, it goes through the whole scene. In the first episode, it's like Quiet Riot and W.A.S.P. And, I think maybe they get into Dokken at that point. And Alan Niven, saying to Don Dokken, I can't sign you. It would be, I can't sign you to my small label. You need to be on a major label immediately. And, the fact that Don Dokken was 30 years old when he was seeking his deal on the Sunset Strip. Yeah, he had put out an album over in Europe. But, it all kind of made sense. It was like, this is an older guy, and that is why, Don Dokken is out on the scene right now. He's out there on the circuit singing with very little voice left. And, the guy was older than really most guys that start out on the Sunset Strip. When I started out there, I was like 20 years old. When I got to Los Angeles, I was like, 19 years old. So I was like 21 when I started playing those clubs. But man, my buddy Roger Carter, when he started playing the Strip, he was 15, half the age of Don Dokken. Don Dokken was a mover and a shaker in the business, and they talk about that. He knew a lot of people, and by the time he was shopping his deal there, he knew what to do. He knew to record, make a good recording, and get the right band and all that. And having George Lynch, look, once again, Van Halen, because George Lynch will tell you himself. At that time, and George Lynch was in a band called The Boys that played on the Strip, and Van Halen would absolutely blow them away. Everybody learned from Eddie, whether it's George Lynch or Randy Rhoads. And those three are the statues, the legends of the Strip, and George is the last one standing. And it goes on, and it talks about, Rat and Motley Crue and that whole era of the Strip. And that was, after David Lee Roth. David Lee Roth would give advice to Vince Neil. And David Lee Roth would pull up in his Mercedes-Benz with a skull and crossbones on the hood and sit down at lunch with Vince Neil and tell him what to watch out for and what not to do and all of these things. But Motley Crue, man, they seemed like they were on a path of destruction. I never was a huge Motley Crue fan. I understand their appeal, and I understand their history in this, and the fact that they sold so many records. They're a huge part of the scene. And, the third episode gets into Guns N' Roses and the final act. And, the fact of the matter is there were so many copycats. And this is where they reach back and talk about Van Halen once again. And it's just kind of, oh, well, everybody was trying to be David Lee Roth. Gee, you think? I mean, my own band, when we put an ad looking for singers, we said Van Halen meets James Brown. Looking for soulful singer, Van Halen meets James Brown. And I didn't start playing the Strip until about 1989, 1990. We were still trying to find that master showman, that master, party master who could lead a band to the golden ticket of a record deal. But like they say, and they show Penelope Spheeris, who directed Decline of Western Civilization. Look, the sad thing about this whole thing is there's limited footage from those days. I mean, not many people had video cameras. The quality was very poor back then. So, having professionally shot video on the Sunset Strip, there's just not a whole lot out there. So I saw bands that I knew kind of back in the day, their footage that's been posted on YouTube for a decade, that footage is being used in this documentary. And, a lot of the stock footage that they have of the Strip, it's having to be reused. And they talk about the Cat House on that. Now, I went to the Cat House. Penelope Spheeris says, oh, I was there every Saturday night. I don't remember the Cat House being open every Saturday night. I seem to feel like it was on an off night, like I don't know if it was a Tuesday or a Monday or something like that. So I was kind of like, what? Wait a minute. Now you can let me know in the comments if you went to the Cat House. I went there a couple times. And I remember one time, meeting a nurse there. And it was a meat market, if you will. The night I went, there was no live band. There was no Guns N' Roses and Jet Boy and all of this and LA Guns. Those were special nights, and you would have had a tough time getting in. I can remember just going in, and they were playing hard rock, and the place started to fill up with rockers and girls that wanted to meet them. And that's what I remember about the Cat House. Of course, it's very easy to romanticize this whole scene, this whole era, and this this is a cautionary tale. This documentary shows that, man, and Alan Niven sums it up, nothing but a good time. You're going to call it that? He says, that is true, because you see this. You're seeing people with a dream. You're seeing people that go out to LA, especially in the third act. You start seeing these bands and they show clips from Decline of Western Civilization. And, a lot of these kids, I hate to say it, but they were knuckleheads. They were, good bands on the Sunset Strip, but they were also a lot of terrible bands and a lot of guys that couldn't play a 12-bar blues and weren't actual musicians. They were stylists. They were rockers. But, once the glitz and glamour of the Sunset Strip was gone, so did their careers as musicians. There's not a lot of us. And I kept playing, and, unlike Stevie Rochelle, who claims, in the video, well, I never got any platinum albums, and I never, I don't have any of that. I just have the memories of the scene. The difference between me and the majority of the players on the Sunset Strip scene is I was a musician. I became a musician first. I could play different styles of music, and I was able to keep going. So unlike Stevie Rochelle, I have a platinum album. I have gold records. Now, I'm not going to be a knucklehead and pull down all my plaques off the wall, but I never gave up on my dream. Many of those on the Sunset Strip, when it all started to fade, and it was a gradual fade. I mean, I was playing on the Strip up until 1994. But see, my band was not just a hair band. I mean, I wrote jazz style ballads. We had rap in some of our songs. Now, granted, yes, we played, hard rock, but, we were not a typical hair band, and not every band on the Strip. I mean, you had the Shrinky Dinks, and that eventually became Sugar Ray. You had Razzle, that eventually became Lit, and a lot of other bands that continued on. So, if you only were able to do one thing, yes, your career was over. If you weren't able to analyze music and play different styles, the ending of the Sunset Strip was, it was catastrophic, but it was a gradual thing. And we still held hope even after grunge came. I mean, I'd seen styles come and go. And all along the hair metal thing, there was also other types of bands, the English, new romantic bands, and all these different kind of things that came along. So we didn't give up or say, oh, it's all over. Nirvana, blew the whole scene up. I've talked about in my video of how the city and the county politics of the area decided they don't want flyers anymore in the Strip. So around the same time as grunge, they sent the police down. They said, we'll arrest you if you're loitering and all this. And they went down to clean up the Sunset Strip. And they started driving the rockers into you either go in the club or you can't hang out on the street. If you're caught with flyers, handing out flyers, you're going to get a fine. You could get arrested. All of this was failed to be mentioned in this documentary. Now, I think it is an excellent documentary, and it's certainly interesting to look at, and it does capture a lot of things. I thought it was a little uncalled for, the shots that Stevie Rochelle fired at Odin singer Randy O. I just felt it was unnecessary. In the grand scheme of things, whether I've got a platinum record or who has it, none of that matters. I still get people every day saying, I don't know who you are. It's like, well, I don't know who you are either. There are people out there who don't know who David Lee Roth is. There are people out there now that don't know who Kurt Cobain is. There are people out there who don't know who Jimmy Page is. It's just a fact of life. Some people are into certain things. Some people aren't. Some people make it, at a high level in life. Some people make it to a mid-level. Some people don't make it at all. We're all in this world together, and we're all struggling to survive. But Nothing But a Good Time does a decent job of showing you kind of behind the scenes and some of the players and some of the characters of that storied, historic, crazy, wild time of the Sunset Strip. But it doesn't tell everybody's story, and it doesn't tell the complete story, but it is a good watch.